Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week we're going to be diving back into the high fantasy / sci-fi epic that is DC's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in November of 2012, before we get started, I would like to recommend that if you have not watched my videos on the first two issues of this series, that you please check out my He-Man playlist, as this is a linear story, and if you try to just jump in, you're kind of missing a lot of the points, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. We see here that this is a terrific cover by one Dan Wilkins. I really like this cover a lot. In my opinion, it's the best of the first three that we've seen so far. Strangely enough, he is not credited over here on the left-hand side as being the one who illustrated this cover. Seems odd, and while this cover isn't wholly representative of what goes on in the story, I think it's still overall just a really cool shot. We've got He-Man right here with the Sword of Power, standing on what's left of a shipwreck with some monsters of the deep coming up at him, with one in particular here in silhouette form that I think anyone who's a fan of He-Man probably recognizes. Here on the inside cover, we are greeted with an advertisement for Craftsman Tools, which seems like a really weird place for Craftsman to be advertising their tool line. I mean, admittedly, pretty much anyone that was buying a He-Man comic in 2012, myself included, would have been an adult most likely. But still, I can't imagine how much business they thought they were going to drum up by advertising in comic books for power tools. I don't know, whatever. Here on the first page, we see that we are at Sand's End on the coastline, right outside of a tavern or an inn perhaps, where Teela and Adam are having a discussion about their circumstance. And Teela brings up the point that she believes that they have been cursed and that somehow their memories have been lost and something is just completely wrong. There's too many things that they know that they shouldn't, and too many things that they don't know but should. Adam seems a little bit reluctant to believe this, and is also somewhat skeptical about the bird Zor that he befriended in the first issue, as Teela states that, she really thinks that this bird is in fact a construct that was created to lead them and bring them together. Adam doesn't seem to really want to have this discussion at the moment, as he tries to change the subject, talking about how disgusting this little crustacean thing in front of him is that he's supposed to be eating. But Teela scolds him and tells him that, he can't just keep denying or turning his back on the facts at hand, and that something's going on and they've been brought together for reasons that they don't understand. Adam once again contests that, that isn't necessarily true. But Teela says that it just feels like that's the most likely thing to have occurred. And Adam somehow realizes that she's correct, and that the both of them are really being led by someone else that's in another place. He also states that, with Zor being a mystical construct, there's so much at play that they don't understand, and they need to find some answers. But until they do so, they're going to have to get across the sea to continue this journey, which leads them to this boat where Teela has secured passage for the both of them. This is actually a really cool ship design where we have what's assumedly a dragon skull of some kind, and then you've also got these big, giant, perhaps dragon tail spikes coming up. I like the way that the sail designs look on here. It's an overall really cool aesthetic of being somewhat Viking in nature, but also having the high-tech type of laser cannons up on the front. That's one of the things I love the most about He-Man as a property, is just that mix between high fantasy swords and sorcery and the weird sci-fi tech of laser cannons and, futuristic vehicles and stuff. It's so much fun to mix those two things together. We also on this page get the credits. This is the third page, and this is where DC decided to put the credits because they wanted to sell advertising space on the inside of the front cover. Writer, Keith Griffin. Penciler, Philip Tan. Inkers, Rui Jose, Norman Lee, Ray Schneider, and Walden Wong. Colorist, Lee Lorridge? Sorry, I know I'm saying that wrong. Letterers, Carlos M. Manguel. Cover, Dan Wilkins. Editor, Michael McAllister. Special thanks, Ben Abernathy. On the deck of the ship, we see Adam with his shirt off in just a pair of pants, and Tila rocking the full Lady Barbarian bikini. Just, I don't know, out for some fun in the sun, I suppose. And they're engaged in a tumultuous discussion because Tila secured tickets for their passage on this ship. However, she only paid for hers and promised the captain that Adam would work off his fare in, return for safe passage. Adam, of course, is very upset about this, but Tila tells him that she could only get enough money from selling the cyber camel that they were on to buy one ticket. And also, that's what that crazy monster they were riding on in the last issue was, apparently, a cyber camel. Adam, he's still just really upset about the whole thing. But Tila says that the merchant she sold the cyber camel to drove a hard bargain, and that cyber camels are also really common and don't go for that much. Adam then states that he's kind of weirded out by the way that Tila keeps putting her hand through Zor, as we see in this lower panel, because as we stated, Zor is a magical construct and doesn't have like a solid physical form. However, it's stated that when the bird perches itself on your shoulder, or appears to, it also gives the illusion of having weight, which is why Adam never realized that the bird itself wasn't a solid form creature that was alive and right there. Like, it's an incredibly high level construct, which Tila even remarks on, that whoever made this was highly skilled. They're then interrupted by the captain of the vessel, who scolds Adam for not doing his chores and swabbing the deck like he's supposed to, which Adam says that he will get right on, as he states never again will he let Tila, secure passage for them on any voyage. Meanwhile, back at Castle Grayskull, we see Skeletor sitting at a large banquet table having a conversation with someone who is off panel, stating that, he's been a generous host and he wonders why he can't get the cooperation, because he wants to know what the key to unlocking Grayskull's power is. He thought for years that the Sword of Power was what was needed to access it, but now he realizes that it was essentially just a beacon that was powered by Grayskull itself. And now he wants to know exactly how to unlock that power so that he can use it to conquer all of Eternia and basically become essentially a living god and, rule perhaps more than just the planet, but even so further into the universe. We then have an advertisement for the Batman Judge Dredd collection. You may notice this artwork on the cover of said collection as being done by one Mike Mignola, the creator of Hellboy. He has a very unique and very recognizable style. I never got really into Hellboy, and it's just kind of one of those things that by the time I really knew of Hellboy as the lore and, being interested in the character, it was well into the series and really hard to try and collect all those issues from the start and very expensive. So maybe one day if the prices on that stuff ever comes down, but as of right now, I don't really have any issues and I don't really plan on having any issues. And, Judge Dredd, he's kind of in that same boat. It's a character that I think is cool, but trying to actually hunt down all those issues of Judge Dredd is no small task. Meanwhile, when we get back into the story, we see that Skeletor was in fact talking this whole time to the sorceress, who he apparently has imprisoned in the dungeons of Grayskull. As we see, she is shackled to her chair, which is kind of funny. Like, her arms are literally bound to the arms of the chair, and he's scolding her for not eating the meal that he's put in front of her. He then states that no matter what, despite the fact that she refuses to speak to him and to cooperate, that he will make sure that she divulges what the key is that he needs to unlock the power of Grayskull and take it for his own devices and use it for his own will. And that in the meantime, she will remain his prisoner and states that because she's decided not to eat, he's going to have her force fed again as we see the guards walk in to take her back to her cell. And we see Skeletor stand up, wipe his mouth, and state, please try to keep it down this time, as it's assumed that, he's really been taking it to the sorceress. She's probably been tortured at this point and is in a really terrible situation, but is holding out for, a miraculous rescue so that she can protect all of Eternia by not giving Skeletor access to the power of Grayskull. Meanwhile, back on the ship, we see that Teela and Adam are sparring with some swords, and Teela is actually rather irritated by how poorly Adam seems to be performing, and states, what happened to all those fancy moves that you had back in the desert, referring to when they were able to escape the clutches of Trapjaw. Adam actually was really competent at wielding a sword at the time, and Adam goes on to explain here that he doesn't know how he did that or how he managed to know all those things, as he feels as though, now he can barely wield a sword with any type of competency at all. This, however, is something that's interrupted when the captain approaches and basically, tells Adam that he's terrible at what he's doing and that he needs to pay more attention to someone with the likes of Teela's skill, which Adam says, hey, thanks for pointing that out and making me feel so good. He then states that Teela may be putting those skills to the test shortly, and Teela asks if this has anything to do with the creatures that have been tailing them. This, of course, surprises Adam, as he didn't even realize it at all, but the captain states that yes, that in fact, they are being tailed by some forces that probably mean them harm. Adam states again, how did you even notice this? The captain says it's irrelevant and that Teela just keeps her eyes peeled. But he states that he's almost positive that it's none other than Mer-Man who's been chasing them down, and he hopes that he can avoid being killed by the self-proclaimed king of the seas by offering up whatever he needs or wants, and potentially he'll just leave him alone, because otherwise they're in some real deep trouble that they may not be able to get out of. We then have an advertisement for the 2012 New York Comic-Con happening between October 11th and 14th. I did not go to this Comic-Con. I've never been to the New York Comic-Con, or New York City for that matter. If you were there and you want to talk about it at all, feel free to leave a comment below, because I'd like to know if it was any good. Back to the story, we see that Adam's attention is caught by a loud sound that he does not like, and Teela states that she thinks this might involve the two of them, as suddenly the deck of the ship cracks and buckles, and we see a giant octopus and or kraken come up from the depths, grab the ship with its tentacles, and hold it tight as Mer-Man stands on top of one of the beast's tentacles and states that he really enjoys when the prey comes to the predator. I actually like this version of Mer-Man a lot. We can see here he was given a large tail in this rendition, and I think that was something that made this version of his character stand out a little bit better and really drive home the idea that he is an undersea fish man. You can't really say he's an Atlantean because they're on Eternia, so Atlantis isn't there. But the idea that, he's part of a race of, fish humanoid creatures that, are sharing a physiology between two separate types of dwellers from the surface and from under the sea. As Mer-Man steps onto what's left of the deck of the ship, Adam wonders if they should be doing something to try and defend themselves or attack Mer-Man. Teela states, however, that they're going to let him make the first move. And Adam states, have we met before? And Mer-Man says, yeah, many times, but rarely as Prince Adam have I ever encountered you. And at this point is when Adam realizes that, he's a prince, because again, he and Teela have lost all their memories, and it's kind of surprising that Mer-Man's kind of spilling the beans on this stuff. Teela even acts shocked and is like, wow, you're a prince? And Adam's like, yeah, this is the first time hearing of that too. And then Mer-Man kind of falls back into the idea that the both of them have had their memories erased. So he once again introduces himself by his formal title of Nauticus Aquaria Mer-Man the First, which I don't know if that's consistent with the rest of He-Man lore, but I love the fact that that's what they decided to do in, this rendition of it. That's such a ridiculous overkill title for, one of the typically perceived or presented as weaker of He-Man's villains. I love that he's got this grandiose title of being, Prince of the Sea. It's hilarious to me. He then states that, he's come for Adam and Teela and that he wants the captain to cooperate. However, the captain states that he plans on fighting Mer-Man, seeing as how they paid him for safe passage and he feels obliged to honor that payment, which, given how he's treated Adam throughout most of the voyage is a little bit surprising, but I think he's actually taken a liking to the two of them. And then Teela states that he'll never take them alive. And Adam is like, seriously, what are you doing here? And she replies that she doesn't know, it just came out. And this, of course, irritates Mer-Man as he states, prove them wrong, as we see the giant octopus blast its tentacle out through the deck of the ship and grab Teela by the ankle and hoist her into the air as Adam loses his footing and some of the other shipmates go flying through the air. Things are not looking good for our heroes in this part of the story. It's bad. We then see a wide shot focusing on the Kraken, or giant octopus, I guess, Mer-Man and other creatures of the deep climbing up the side of the ship to board the deck and attack the crew. As we see Teela being flung into the air, she has a speech bubble that just has an asterisk. Now, the reason for that is she's apparently supposed to be swearing profusely, but as it states here in the bottom corner, let's just call it language that's quite inappropriate for a comic book and leave it at that, which is a really kind of funny and creative way to censor your comic, even though that you could almost assume that this was going to be sold to a more mature audience, given the age range of people who grew up with He-Man. It's still funny to think that they were like, all right, well, it's still a DC book, so we can't just go full-fledged with all kinds of adult language. We'll just kind of, make it known that we wanted to, but we couldn't. Adam decides to go on the attack as he cuts at the octopus tentacle with a sword. However, it has little effect. He turns around and sees one of the other crew members trying to fight off some sort of lobster crustacean man with an axe and realizes that he could be more effective if he changes up his weapon. So he plunges the sword into the back of the crustacean monster, killing it, and states, hey, trade ya, as he snatches the axe from the hand of the crew member. He then runs up to the same octopus tentacle with the axe and states for Teela to get ready, as she states, oh no, please don't, but it's too late, as we see the chop, and she's about to go for a wild ride. After being injured and in a great deal of pain, the giant octopus/kraken monster lets go of the ship and also flings Teela up into the air. She lands in the water with a splash as we see the monster creeping back into the depths of the water. Adam realizes now that this may not have been the correct choice, but he is at least happy that Teela's free. However, he can't celebrate for too long as he is immediately attacked by Mer-Man, who hits him in the gut and quickly starts to get the better of him as he starts to talk to Adam and telling him how humorous he finds it that, his uncle gave him the illusion of being a woodsman and that he wants him to bow and, acknowledge that he is the master of the ocean. And if he does this, he'll give Adam a quick death. Adam states that he has no interest in doing that, but that we then see that Mer-Man says, better you had lived better you had lived the life you were given by Skeletor, and, you could have avoided all of this happening. And then he states, now He-Man is dead, as he punches him again. Of course, Adam then tries to go on the counterattack, kicking him in the gut, saying never. And then we see that Mer-Man states that, the jig is up. It's time for him to end this, and that, despite him having all this rage, Adam has no idea what the purpose or the origin of all this rage is, and he's going to die never knowing. And he begins to grab a large crate or chest and pick it up so that he can deliver the final blow. As Mer-Man lifts the chest up above his head to throw it onto Adam and end his life, we see a sword blade suddenly burst through his chest from behind, cutting him off before he has the opportunity, as he then drops the chest directly on top of himself. The sword, of course, belonged to none other than Teela, who has managed to get herself back onto the deck of the boat. Adam is shocked to see his friend, coming to his aid once again. But she then scolds him and says that, she's going to get him back for cutting the monster's tentacle and getting her into the ocean, which Adam is surprised about as he says, I was saving your life. And then Teela points out that she found out that she can't swim. And Adam realizes that he didn't even consider that might be a possibility, and then wonders how she was able to get back on the boat. She states she climbed up the tentacle of the giant Kraken monster to get back on the ship, which we see is now apparently on fire. As we see the Kraken monster approaching once again, things are looking pretty bad at this point, as we see that Mer-Man is back on his feet and states that, were he a weaker type of creature as they are, at least to him, that would have been the end of his life, but he's able to apparently withstand being run through with a sword. He then states that, he's actually surprised that Teela would attack him from behind like that, given all of the, lessons about honor and chivalry that her father bestowed upon her. She then states that her father sold her into slavery, which only makes Mer-Man laugh even harder as he realizes how far removed the two of them are from reality and not knowing their own past and living in this fantasy lie that Skeletor has created for them. And he thinks it's absolutely hilarious. But he then states that he doesn't have the time nor the patience to deal with, trying to basically explain to the two of them who they really are and exactly, how far they've fallen from that position, and that it's his time to finally end the mission that he was given. Feeling that he has won the day, Mer-Man decides to go ahead and gloat over his victory, stating that, he's been under Skeletor's charge the entire time, and that Skeletor's orders were quite specific, that he was to kill Prince Adam with his own hands and Teela as well. And he actually states that it's somewhat of a pity that the two of them remember nothing about their former lives, because if they did, they would have remembered that Mer-Man's command of, over the realm of the sea extends to not just the creatures, but also the realm itself, as we see him start to call up a huge torrent of waves. As Adam decides to try and get away, he grabs Teela by the waist and jumps off the boat. However, Mer-Man scolds him, stating that there's nowhere to run to, as we see a giant wave crash down onto the ship and destroy it. We also see the Kraken monster in the background kind of getting flung. Then we see tons of debris falling down as Mer-Man stands on the water surface, looking about and basically just reveling in his victory. We then see an advertisement for Earth 1 Volume 2. There's also Earth 1 Volume 1. I didn't read any of these books, but if you did, I'd like to know if they were any good. Feel free to leave a comment about it in the comment section below. And we then get back to the story, seeing that Mer-Man has basically decided that no landborn creature could have survived such a blow, and that Skeletor will be very pleased to know that he's succeeded in his task of killing Adam and Teela, as he sinks down below the depths of the water again, and we see that there's nothing really left of the ship but a bunch of debris, as Adam is face down in the water and Teela is slung over some debris. Zor looks on, screeching to try and revive the two of them, as we end on a bit of a cliffhanger, but, let's face it, the two of them are going to be fine. The surprising part, well, I shouldn't even say surprising, because let's be honest, it's, a comic book, and it's a comic book based on He-Man. Mer-Man doesn't even think to check and make sure that the two of them are dead. Like, dude, you have weapons. You could just kill them, but you decided to do something that they could potentially get away from, and then just, say, oh no, I'm so powerful, I obviously killed them right there. It's just such classic 80s villainry brought into the new millennium. I love it. It's great. I mean, it's not great from a storytelling perspective, but it's great for this story in particular. We then see an advertisement for Hell on Earth, a super crossover. I did not read this. Admittedly, I have nothing against Superman, but I'm just not a huge fan of Superman. So I typically don't pick up Superman titles, as, again, they're not something I find that interesting. However, we then get a sneak peek at Superman number 13, where we see Superman inside of a large mechanical contraption talking to someone who is off page, as he's been trying to test the limits of his strength, and apparently this machine has been pushing him as far as it's possibly able to take him, as the person off page says that he's essentially been bench pressing the weight of the earth for the last 5 days, or the equivalent to the weight of the earth for the last 5 days. And, this is one of those things of like, we're trying to really quantify just how insanely strong Superman really is. And, he states that it feels like he hasn't really broken that much of a sweat, and he wants to push the envelope even farther. We then see exactly how large the contraption that Superman was strapped into really is. This is really, I like the artwork here. This in particular reminds me a lot of the artwork that exists in the mangas Blame and Biomega. If you've ever read either one of those mangas, or if you've watched the Blame movie that's on Netflix, or the Knights of Sidonia anime that's on Netflix, which I also have the Knights of Sidonia manga. They're all by the same creator and artist, Tsutomu Nihai, I believe is how you say his word, or say his name. But I'm not super fluent in Japanese, so if I'm wrong, I apologize. But Nihai's artwork is very much along these lines of just weird, outrageous technology, but in crazy scales. And I like that kind of stuff. And I think that this is actually very, very similar to it in a lot of ways. We find out that the only way for Superman's strength to be tested any further than this is if they create a pan-dimensional wormhole, which could possibly destroy the Earth, so they decided against it. We then see that Superman has been talking to a character named Dr. Veritas, who I have to admit I'm not familiar with. I don't know if she existed before the New 52, or if she was a new character for the New 52. If you happen to know the answer to that, feel free to leave it in the comments section, because I'd like to know. She's been trying to help Superman find exactly what his limitations are, and he appreciates it a lot, but he tells her that, this is something that he wouldn't just trust anybody to do, as, he doesn't want the wrong people to know what his limitations are. She states that, it's no worries, that any of his secrets are safe with her, and that she happens to see that he's sweating a little, and that's all she wants in payment for his gratitude, is one droplet of his perspiration. As we see the doctor reach in and take a bead of his sweat, she is surprised when Superman lifts her up in the air and says, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I was actually perspiring. That rarely happens ever," kind of alluding to the fact that Superman's strength level is so high that he almost never has to exert himself to a point where he's actually perspiring. She's kind of shocked that he takes joy in such a strange and small thing. And he once again reiterates that, he's really trusting her a lot with, these tests that they've been running, and trying to find the upper limits of his strength, and figuring out, where exactly his physical capabilities reach their limits. And that, he wants to make sure she knows not to ever let this information, be divulged to anyone else as he leaves. And Dr. Veritas thinks to herself, if she didn't know Superman better, she would almost have thought that that was a threat. Superman, as he's leaving, realizes that she might have perceived that the wrong way, and realizes that because he's so powerful, he needs to be very careful in the way he words things, so that, people realize what his true intentions behind the words he speaks are, as he notices that, half of the Earth thinks that, he's the savior of humanity, and the other half of the Earth seems that he's just an advanced scout for an alien race that wants to come in and take over the world. We see him flying up into the heavens and up out of the stratosphere so that he can bask in the rays of the sun, as he's been in this side of Dr. Veritas's facility for the last week. He's not been able to, recharge his batteries, so to speak. And he then realizes that, he's about to be late for work as he zooms back to Metropolis, hops into his apartment, and states he's got 6 seconds to take a shower, change, and be to the Daily Planet. And that's plenty of time because he's Superman. And apparently this was a snippet of what happened in issue 13, which was a prelude to the Hell on Earth storyline. I don't know anything about that. As I stated, I don't really read much in the way of Superman. He's never been a character I found super intriguing. Not that I have anything against the character. I just think that, in order to do Superman well, because of how powerful he is, the stories would almost have to be about, a really, really good villain who is willing to hurt anyone and everyone around Superman as a means to get to him because they can't hurt him. Almost as if Lex Luthor was as evil and maniacal as the Joker, in a sense. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. That's just my take on it, but I feel like that's the kind of Superman story I would find really interesting. The next 2 pages are a bunch of pencils for upcoming books in the New 52, namely Talon #1, Phantom Stranger #1, Team 7 #1, that of course being the DC version of Team 7, not the Image Comics version of Team 7. If you would like to know more about the Image Comics version of Team 7, feel free to check out my Team 7 playlist. And Sword of Sorcery #1, which apparently is a look at the past and future of the secrets of the New 52. Overall, these are actually pretty good little snippets and drawings. I like them a lot. I didn't care that much for the Talon character as he was introduced in the New 52. There's nothing necessarily wrong with him. I don't know. He just felt like, kind of almost like a Batman in a different costume. I guess the difference between like Flash and Reverse Flash or something like that, that kind of stuff. But that's just my take. I mean, you may love Talon. It's just he didn't do it for me. We then see an advertisement for the brand new series at the time, Arrow, which was to be airing on the CW. I was never a huge fan of the Arrowverse. I watched bits and pieces of Arrow, bits and pieces of The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, Supergirl. I never watched any of Batwoman though. But I feel like maybe that's okay. All that aside, I liked The Flash the best out of all of them, or at least like the first season of The Flash. And then, it all just kind of got into this, like what I felt to be manufactured drama, of just kind of like creating the most dramatic aspects for the sake of creating the most dramatic aspects. I don't know. I know that the Arrowverse was really popular and there were a lot of people who really liked it, but as a whole, it just never grabbed me in a way that made me want to, tune in every single week for every single episode. I appreciate that it exists, but it just wasn't really my cup of tea. And on the reverse inside cover, we see an advertisement for We Can Be Heroes, which is a charitable organization that raises money to fight hunger in Africa. You can donate to whatever kind of charity you like, but I do encourage anyone watching this to find a charity that's important to you and, check on it too to make sure that they're really doing what they say that they're doing. But finding a charity that's important to you, make sure that it's solid, and, whatever money you can afford to give or just time you can afford to give, do it. There's always someone that you can help. And even if it's just in a small way, it's always good to do what you can to help others who are in real need. And that was He-Man and the Masters of the Universe #3. Overall, I really liked this book a lot. As I stated, the cover not fully representative of what happens in the book, as Adam never actually turns into He-Man in this book. But, that aside, it's great. Cover to cover, I think the story's really intriguing. I really like what they're doing with, Skeletor having essentially won and having the sorceress as his, prisoner inside of Grayskull, trying to have He-Man and Teela killed before, they can try and undo the things that he's done. I also really like the way that Mer-Man was depicted in this issue. they did a great job of taking the classic version of Mer-Man, modernizing him to a point where he feels like a threatening villain, and at the same time keeping, certain characteristics of him from that original 80s version of, Mer-Man as a cartoon villain, and making it all feel natural. It was a great feat of writing and, art to come together and really just bring Mer-Man into the 21st century in a way that, doesn't seem, weird or goofy, but at the same time doesn't seem like he's overly powerful. It's a perfect balance, and I can't applaud them enough for the way they did it. But, once again, as with everything, those are just my opinions. Your opinions may vary, and you might have thought they did a terrible job with this book and the way that they represented Mer-Man in it. But it's okay, because everyone's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.